My ex-wife saw me flirting with my neighbor, and the next morning, she was standing on my porch at 9:16, 2 cups of coffee going cold in her hands, telling me the woman next door wasn't right for me. I'm Daniel Mercer, a farmer who spent 7 years married to Elena before she handed me divorce papers and walked out of my life 14 months ago. So when my ex-wife knocked on my door to say my neighbor wasn't right for me, I almost laughed. This was the same woman who left me. The same woman who hasn't looked back since. But when I asked her the one question that mattered, how would you know? She opened her mouth to answer and stopped, because the truth standing in that doorway wasn't about my neighbor at all. It was about the flower I used to leave on her pillow every spring and the morning I stopped. She knew exactly what was right for me. But the question that haunted us both was why, after walking away 14 months ago, she'd driven all the way back to my porch to say it. Let me take you back, just one day, one single day before that knock, because that's where this whole thing really begins. And you need to see it the way I lived it, or none of what comes after will land the way it should. It was a Friday in late October, and the sun was sinking low and orange over my fields, the kind of light that makes everything look like a memory, even while it's still happening. I'd been out working since before the sky turned gray. The harvest doesn't care if you're tired. It doesn't care if your back aches, or your hands are split open, or your heart's been broken in half. And never set right. It just keeps coming. Row after row, apple after apple, day after day. And there's a strange mercy in that, if you let yourself feel it. The way the work doesn't stop for your grief. The way the land keeps needing you, even when you've stopped knowing why you get up in the morning. My hands were cracked that evening. My boots were heavy with dirt. My shirt was stuck to my back with the sweat of a long day. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I sat down on my porch steps, and I didn't think about her. I didn't think about the empty side of the bed, or the second toothbrush I'd thrown away, or the way the house had gotten so quiet I'd started leaving the radio on, just to hear another human voice. I just breathed. The maples along my fence line had gone gold and red, and a few leaves were letting go, drifting down slow and lazy through the warm light. The air smelled like cut hay and wood smoke, and that cold edge that comes in October when summer finally admits it's over. Somewhere down the road a dog was barking at nothing. I had an apple in my hand. One of my own, off my own trees, the trees my father planted and his father before him, and I bit into it, and it was crisp and sweet and cold, and I thought, maybe I'm okay. Maybe, after everything, I'm finally going to be okay. That's always the moment, isn't it? That's the exact moment life leans in close and decides to remind you who's really in charge. You look like a man who needs a terrible joke. I turned, and there she was, Kara, my new neighbor. She'd moved into the old Hadley farmhouse about 3 months back, and the whole town had been buzzing about her ever since. A travel photographer, single, from the city, with a laugh you could hear from the road. She was standing at the edge of my yard in paint-stained overalls, a camera hanging around her neck like it was part of her body, her hair tied up messy with a pencil stuck through it. She had this smile, this easy, crooked smile, like the entire world was a private joke, and she was the only one who'd figured out the punchline. And I laughed. I want you to understand something about that laugh, because it matters. I laughed before she even told the joke. It just came up out of me, sudden and surprising, like water from a pump that hadn't been used in years. I hadn't laughed like that in so long I'd forgotten the sound of my own voice doing it. Come on then, I said. Let's hear it. She climbed up and sat down on the steps beside me, uninvited, easy as anything, and told me a joke so bad I groaned out loud, and then laughed anyway. And that was it. That was all it took. We just started talking. We sat on those porch steps for almost an hour while the sun went down. She told me about the places she'd been. Rice terraces in countries I couldn't point to on a map. Mountains that touched the clouds. Cities that never slept. She talked with her whole body, her hands flying everywhere, her eyes lighting up. To a man who'd spent his entire life inside the borders of one farm, She was like a window thrown open in a room I didn't even know had gone stuffy. And then she asked about me, and I found myself telling her about the spring, 3 years back, when a late frost came in the night and nearly killed everything I owned. How I'd stood out in the freezing dark with smudge pots and prayers, trying to keep the blossoms warm, crying like a little boy because I thought I was going to lose the trees my family had bled for over 100 years. I'd never told anyone that, not even Elena, especially not Elena. By then, we'd already stopped telling each other the things that scared us. But Kara just listened. She didn't fix it. She didn't look away. She just let me say it and nodded and said, "But you saved them." "Most of them," I said. "But you stayed out there all night for them." "Yeah, that's the part that matters," she said. "And it was easy. That's the only word I have for it. Easy. There was no history between us. No wounds, no silences that meant something. No years of small disappointments stacked up like stones between two people until they can't even see each other over the pile anymore." And here's what I've learned about easy. When you've been drowning in hard for 14 straight months, when every day is heavy and every night is long and every memory has teeth, easy doesn't just feel nice. Easy feels like air. Easy feels like coming up out of deep water and finally filling your lungs. So I sat there and I breathed it in. And because I was breathing it in, I never saw the silver car. I didn't see it slow down on the gravel road behind us. I didn't see it stop, just for a moment, just long enough. I didn't see the woman frozen behind the wheel, her knuckles white, our 6-year-old daughter Sophie asleep in the car seat behind her. I didn't see Elena, my ex-wife, the woman who built a life with me and then tore it down, sitting in that car, watching me, throw my head back and laugh with another woman in the last gold light of the day. I didn't see her face. I've thought about her face 1,000 times since. What it must have looked like. What it must have cost her to sit there and watch. But I didn't see it. I was too busy laughing. I didn't see her hands tighten on the wheel. I didn't see whatever it was that crossed her face. And I didn't see her press her foot back down on the gas and drive away into the dark without ever rolling down her window, without ever saying a single word, carrying our sleeping daughter home to a house I'd never been inside. I just kept laughing on that porch, with my new neighbor beside me, thinking I was finally free. Kara left when the stars came out. "Same time tomorrow, farmer?" she called over her shoulder, and I said something back. And she laughed, and I went inside. And I slept that night like a man with nothing in the world weighing on him. I slept deep and dreamless and easy. And I think that might be the cruelest trick life ever plays on us, the way it lets us feel so peaceful, so light, so sure that the worst is finally behind us, in the very last hours, before everything we thought we understood comes apart in our hands. The next morning, I was making pancakes. Sophie had stayed the night. It was my weekend, one of the few I got, and she was sitting at the kitchen table in her dinosaur pajamas, her hair sticking up every direction, her little tongue poking out the side of her mouth, the way it always does when she's concentrating hard. She had a sheet of paper in front of her and a fistful of those fat crayons kids use, and she was drawing with the kind of total seriousness only a 6-year-old can give to anything. The kitchen smelled like pancake batter and coffee and the maple syrup warming on the stove. The little radio on the windowsill was playing something soft and old. The autumn sun was coming through the glass thin and golden, lighting up the flower dust floating in the air. It was, I remember thinking, a good morning. A simple good morning, the kind I'd stopped letting myself hope for. "What you drawing, Bug?" I asked, flipping a pancake. "Our family," she said, not looking up. I smiled and glanced over at her paper. A house. A big lopsided crayon house with a brown roof and a yellow sun in the corner with lines coming off it, and in front of the house, holding hands in a little row, 4 stick figures. 4. I didn't count them. God help me, I should have counted them. But the pancake was browning, and the syrup needed stirring, and I was happy, and I didn't count the figures in my little girl's drawing. I just smiled and turned back to the stove. And then the doorbell rang. I looked up at the clock on the stove. It glowed green in the morning light. 9:17. I'll remember that number until the day I die. 9:17 in the morning. I wiped my hands on the dish towel hanging off my shoulder and walked to the front door, not thinking anything of it, figuring it was a delivery or a neighbor or one of the farmhands come early. I pulled the door open, and everything in me went still. Elena. She was standing on my porch in that camel-colored coat she's had for as long as I've known her, the one that always smelled faintly like her perfume and the cold. Her dark hair was pulled back from her face, and her face was calm, but I knew that calm. I'd been married to that calm for 7 years. It was the calm of deep water, the kind that looks still on the surface and goes down further than you'd ever guess. It was the calm she wore when something underneath was so big she didn't dare let it move. She had 2 cups of coffee in her hands, one in each hand. Take-out cups, lids on, steam curling up thin from the little holes, and she was holding them the way you hold something when your hands need a job to do, gripping them tight, like they were the only thing keeping her upright on my porch. "Good morning," she said. My heart was doing something I didn't have a name for. "Elena, Sophie's inside, is everything." "I know," she said. "I came early." And then she just looked at me. A long, long look. The kind of look that has 14 months of silence folded up inside it. 14 months of unanswered questions and unsaid words, and a whole marriage worth of things neither of us ever managed to say out loud. "That woman next door," she said, and her voice was very quiet. "The one you were with last night." The bottom dropped out of my stomach. She'd seen. Somehow, someway, she'd seen us on that porch. "Kara?" I said, and I heard myself getting defensive, heard the edge come into my own voice. "We were just talking. On the porch. That's all it was, Elena. We were just. She's not right for you." 4 words. So soft I almost didn't hear them. Not cruel, not loud, not jealous, even. Or if it was jealousy, it was buried so deep under that calm that it didn't show. Just certain. Completely, utterly certain. The way Elena said everything, when she meant it most. And if you'd been married to her, you'd understand why those 4 quiet words hit me harder than if she'd screamed them. Because Elena never wasted words. Not ever. When we fought, and we did fight, near the end, she didn't shout. She got quiet, and that quiet was worse than anything, because it meant she'd already thought it through. It meant whatever she was saying, she'd turned it over in her mind 100 times before it ever reached her lips. So when Elena stood on my porch and said, quietly, "She's not right for you," it meant she'd already thought about it 100 times, maybe more. And something rose up in me then. It wasn't quite anger. It was hotter than that, and older, and far more confused. Because who was she? Who was she to stand here, on this porch, the porch of the house she'd packed up and walked away from, holding 2 cups of coffee like a peace offering, and tell me, after everything, who was and wasn't right for me? She left. She was the one who left. "How would you know that?" I asked her. And I watched it happen. I watched my strong, proud, unbreakable ex-wife, the woman who'd handed me divorce papers across a kitchen table without her voice shaking even once, the woman who'd packed her entire life into cardboard boxes and never let me see her cry. I watched her open her mouth to answer me, and stop. Her lips parted, and something crossed her face. Fast, like a bird flashing past a window. There and gone before you're even sure you saw it. Something raw. Something terribly, nakedly honest. Something that had nothing to do with my neighbor, and everything to do with her, with us, with whatever she'd been carrying around inside her for 14 months. For just 1 second, the calm broke. For just 1 second, I saw all the way down to the bottom of the deep water, and what was down there stopped my breath. For 1 second, Elena Mercer looked like she was going to break wide open right there on my porch. But she didn't. She closed her mouth. She swallowed. She lifted her chin in that way she has. That proud, practiced way, the armor going back on right in front of my eyes. And in a voice that had gone smooth and steady again, she said, "Sophie's waiting," and she walked right past me. Through the door. Into the house that used to be ours, where our daughter sat at the kitchen table, drawing a family with 4 people in it. And I just stood there, in the open doorway, the cold morning air pouring in around me. a dish towel still hanging off my shoulder. Two questions burning twin holes straight through the center of my chest. How did she know what was right for me? And why, after 14 months of silence, of nothing, of walking away and never once, not one single time, looking back, had she gotten up early on a Saturday morning, bought 2 cups of coffee, and driven all the way out to my farm to tell me? I didn't know it yet. Standing there in that doorway with the autumn wind at my back and my heart slamming against my ribs, I had no idea. But the answer to those 2 questions was going to reach back through 7 years of marriage and 14 months of silence. It was going to dig up things I'd buried so deep I'd forgotten I'd buried them at all. It was going to take everything I thought I knew. About why she's left. About the kind of husband I'd been. About the man I'd let myself become, and turn the whole thing upside down. It started with a flower. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I couldn't stop thinking about it. That's the thing nobody tells you about 4 little words, how they can crawl inside your head and live there. For 3 days after Elena stood on my porch, I worked the orchard like a man possessed. I picked apples until my shoulders screamed. I mended a fence that didn't really need mending. I cleaned out the barn twice. And the whole time, her voice was right there behind my eyes, soft and certain. She's not right for you. But it wasn't the words that haunted me. It was the way she'd stopped. Because here's what I kept circling back to, over and over, like a dog worrying a bone. Elena didn't say don't date. She didn't say it's too soon. She didn't say anything a bitter ex-wife would say. She said she's not right for you. And you don't say a sentence like that unless you've already got a picture in your head of what right would look like. You can't measure something as wrongs unless you're holding it up against something you believe is right. Elena had a picture in her head of what was right for me, and that picture wasn't Kara. And maybe the thought kept sneaking up on me when I least expected it, while I was hauling crates or washing dishes or lying awake at 2 in the morning. Maybe that picture had a face. Maybe it had her face. I tried to drown the thought. I really did. And the way I tried to drown it was Kara. I started spending more time with her. We fell into a rhythm, the two of us. Coffee passed over the low fence between our properties in the mornings. Walks out to the back of the orchard in the gold afternoon light, while she photographed the trees. She'd make me carry her gear, this big heavy camera bag, and she'd boss me around about where to stand and how to hold the reflector, and we'd laugh. It was good. She was good, warm and curious and alive, full of stories, never once asking me to be more than exactly what I was. But something had changed. Before that knock on my door, when Kara laughed, I'd been right there with her, all of me, soaking it up. Now when she laughed, I was present for about half a second, and then I was gone. Somewhere else entirely. Back in a doorway at 9:17 in the morning, watching a proud woman's mouth open and close around a truth she couldn't say. Kara noticed. Of course she noticed. She noticed everything. It was her whole job, looking at things, really seeing them. But she didn't say anything yet. And meanwhile, on the other side of town, in an apartment I'd never set foot in, Elena was moving through her own days like nothing had happened. Because that was Elena. That was always Elena. She went to work. She ran a small interior design business, made cold, empty rooms feel like homes, which I'd come to think later was about the saddest irony there ever was. She picked Sophie up from school. She smiled. She made dinner. She acted, in every visible way, like a woman who had not driven to her ex-husband's farm and nearly fallen apart on his porch. She even had dinner that week with a man named Marcus. I found out about Marcus later, so let me tell it to you the way I came to understand it. Marcus was a nice man. Genuinely nice, a lawyer, kind eyes, good to her, the kind of man your friends are relieved you finally found. He'd been taking Elena to dinner on and off for a couple of months. Nothing serious. And that night, sitting across from him in a quiet restaurant with candlelight on the table, Marcus reached over and took her hand, and Elena let him. She smiled, and she let him hold her hand. And the whole time she was thinking about the look on my face in that doorway. The way I'd said, "How would you know?" The way I'd looked at her like she was a stranger who'd wandered onto my porch. She let a good man hold her hand, and she felt absolutely nothing. And somewhere underneath that calm surface, I think that terrified her more than anything else. But all of it, was just the slow fuse burning down. The real explosion came on a Wednesday, about 3 weeks after the knock, and it came from the one person neither of us could armor ourselves against. It came from Sophie. Her school was doing some kind of family art project, and I'd come to pick her up. I parked the truck and walked up toward the school gate, and Kara happened to be there too. She'd swung by to grab me for some errand. I don't even remember what. She was leaning against her car in the afternoon sun. And Sophie came running out of those gates, backpack bouncing, pigtails flying, and the second she spotted Kara, she screamed it at the top of her lungs. Kara! She'd met Kara maybe twice, but to a 6-year-old, Kara was pure magic. A lady with a real camera who'd been to dragon countries and showed her pictures of monkeys. Sophie barreled straight past me and threw herself at Kara, and Kara caught her and swung her up onto her hip, laughing. And Sophie wrapped her little arms around Kara's neck like she'd known her whole life. And then Sophie did the thing that broke everything open. She took Kara's face in both her small hands, the way kids do when they have something very important to say, and she announced it loud and proud for the whole parking lot to hear. "You should come to my school thing. Daddy needs somebody to sit with." I felt my face go hot. Kara laughed, easy as ever, and said, "Maybe someday, Bug," and set her down. And that's when I saw the silver car. Elaine had pulled in 5 minutes behind me. Sophie had forgotten her backpack at home over the weekend. No, that's not right. She'd forgotten a permission slip. Something small. Something that needed Elena's signature. And Elena had driven it over herself rather than mail. She was standing maybe 20 feet away, frozen, keys still in her hand, and she'd seen the whole thing. She'd seen Kara swing our daughter up onto her hip. She'd seen Sophie's arms go around another woman's neck. She'd seen Sophie lean her head down on Kara's shoulder, comfortable, trusting, and she'd heard it. She'd heard our little girl say it to the whole world. Daddy needs somebody to sit with. I watched Elena's face, and for once, the calm wasn't there. For once, she didn't have time to put the armor on. I saw it hit her, full force, right in the chest, in front of the school, in the afternoon sun. Saw something crumple behind her eyes. She didn't come over. She didn't say anything. She handed me the permission slip without a word, the paper trembling just slightly in her fingers. She gave Sophie a quick, fierce hug and a kiss on the head. And then she turned and walked back to her car, fast, her chin up, her shoulders square. But I knew her. God help me. I still knew her better than I knew anyone. And I knew exactly what that fast walk and that high chin meant. It meant don't let them see. She got in her car. She shut the door. And I watched from across that parking lot, with my daughter tugging at my hand and my neighbor smiling beside me. I watched my ex-wife, the woman who hadn't let me see her cry in 14 months, press the back of her hand against her mouth and fold forward over her own steering wheel. She wasn't crying because she was jealous of Kara. That's what I thought at first, but I had it wrong, and I'd understand it later. She was crying because Sophie had said it out loud. The truest thing anybody'd said in over a year. Daddy needs somebody to sit with, and that somebody, for 7 years, had been her. She was the one who used to sit with me. And now our own daughter had looked around at her life and decided that seat was empty and was offering it to someone else. She drove away before I could move. I don't think she ever knew I saw. That night, alone in her apartment, Elena did 2 things. The first was she called Marcus. She told him, gently, that she couldn't keep seeing him, that it wasn't fair to him, that her heart was somewhere it had no business being, and until she dealt with that, she had no right to hold anyone's hand across a dinner table. Marcus, being the good man he was, took it well. I think he'd known for a while. I think he'd felt her looking through him at someone who wasn't there. And then Elena did the second thing. She sat down in the middle of her beautiful, perfectly arranged apartment. Every cushion placed just so, every color chosen with care, a home she'd built for an audience of nobody. And she finally, after 14 months, let the silence get loud. she let herself remember why she'd left. Because here's the truth she'd never told me, the truth that was sitting at the very bottom of that deep, calm water. Elena didn't leave because she stopped loving me. Elena left because she felt like a ghost in her own marriage. Because, somewhere in those 7 years, I'd stopped looking up when she walked into a room. I'd come in from the fields exhausted, and I'd eat and I'd fall asleep. And the farm got all my words and all my worry and all my care, and she got the leftovers. She'd be standing right in front of me, and I wouldn't see her. She'd talk, and I'd nod without hearing. She started to feel like a piece of furniture in her own home, useful, present, and completely invisible. And the thing she wanted, the only thing she'd ever really wanted, was to be chosen. Not assumed, not taken for granted like the sunrise, chosen, on purpose, out loud. But she never told me that. Not in those words, not ever. Because Elena Mercer did not beg. She'd watched her own mother beg a man to stay her whole childhood, beg and shrink and disappear. And Elena had promised herself she would die before she'd do the same. So instead of telling me she felt invisible, instead of saying I miss you even though you're right here, she got quiet. And then she got papers, and she handed them to me across the kitchen table with steady hands. And she let me believe she'd simply stopped caring, when the truth was the exact and total opposite. Now, while Elena was learning to let her silence get loud across town, I was about to dig up the past with my own 2 hands. Literally, it was that same night. I couldn't sleep. I hadn't really slept right in weeks. So, I went up into the spare room, the one full of boxes I still hadn't unpacked from when I'd had to consolidate everything after the divorce. Boxes I'd been avoiding for over a year. Because every one of them was a little coffin full of our old life. I told myself I was looking for a flashlight. I don't know what I was really looking for. But down at the bottom of a box marked MISC in my own bad handwriting, underneath old tax papers and a busted picture frame, my fingers found a small tin, an old cookie tin, dented at the corner, the paint worn off. I knew it before I even opened it. My hands knew it. I sat down right there on the dusty floor and pried the lid off. Inside were flowers, dozens of them, dried and pressed flat and gone brown gold with age, paper-thin, fragile as moth wings. Little wildflowers, the kind that grow at the far edge of my back field where the orchard gives way to wild grass. And just like that, I remembered. Every spring, every single spring of our marriage, on the first warm morning when the wild grass bloomed, I'd walk out to the back field before dawn. And I'd pick the very first flower of the season. And I'd carry it back through the dark, all that way, and I'd lay it on Elena's pillow so it would be the first thing she saw when she opened her eyes. I did it the first spring we were married, and she'd held it up and laughed at me. This gruff farmer with a tiny weed in his big rough hand, and she'd said it was the most romantic thing anyone had ever done for her. So I did it the next spring, and the next. It became ours. Our small secret thing. She saved everyone. She'd kept them all, in this tin, and I never even knew. I sat on that floor holding that tin of pressed flowers, and I tried to remember the last spring I'd done it. And I couldn't. I couldn't remember stopping. That was the thing that hollowed me out, sitting there in the dark. There was no fight, no decision, no moment where I thought I won't do it this year. I just stopped. Some spring, somewhere in the last few years, the first warm morning came, and I was busy, or I was tired, or I was worried about the irrigation or the market price or 100 other things that felt so important. And I didn't walk out to the back field. And then it just never started again. The flowers stopped appearing on her pillow, and she never said a word. But she'd lain there, spring after spring, waiting to wake up and find one. And one year it didn't come, and she didn't ask why. She just added it quietly to the growing pile of small proofs that her husband had stopped seeing her. I sat on that floor for a long, long time, holding 14 years of pressed flowers in a dented tin, while the truth came down on me slow and heavy and unbearable. She didn't leave because she was cold. She left because she got tired of waiting for me to remember she was there. "She's not right for you," Elena had said on my porch, and I'd asked how would you know, like it was a challenge, like she had no right. But she knew. Of course she knew. She knew exactly what was right for me, because she'd once been it, and she'd watched me forget, one missed flower at a time. I looked down at the tin in my hands, and I knew with a certainty that scared me exactly what I had to do. But first, I had to talk to Kara, because she deserved the truth, and because I had a feeling she already knew it. The next morning, I went to find Kara before I could lose my nerve. She was out in her yard, coffee in hand, watching the sun come up over the fields. I climbed over the low fence the way I always did, and she handed me the second cup without even asking, the way she always did. And for a moment we just stood there, the two of us, in the cold gold morning. "Can I ask you something strange?" I said. "Always," she said. "Strange is my favorite kind of question." I held my coffee and looked out at the trees instead of at her because it was easier. "When you look at me," I said, "really look, what do you see?" Kara was quiet for a moment. She was a photographer. She didn't answer questions about looking lightly. She took a slow sip of her coffee, and when she finally spoke, her voice was gentle. But she didn't soften the truth. "I see a man who's really, really good at growing things for other people," she said. "Apples, a farm, a family, a whole life that other folks get to walk through and enjoy." She paused. "And I see a man who never once learned how to tend anything of his own, who lets his own field go quiet while he's busy keeping everyone else's green." I felt that land somewhere deep. "And," she said, even softer now, "I see a man who isn't available, who hasn't been available for one single second since his ex-wife knocked on his door with 2 cups of coffee." I turned to look at her then. She was smiling, but it was a sad smile, a kind one, with no anger in it anywhere. "Kara, it's okay," she said. "Daniel, it's okay. I've been paying attention. It's my whole job, remember? You light up when you talk about her, without even knowing you're doing it. You went somewhere far away the morning she came over and you never really came back." She shrugged. "Easy as anything. I like you. I do. But I'm not interested in being the woman a man settles for because he's too scared to go get the one he can't stop thinking about." "She left me," I said. "The old defense, the one I'd been hiding behind for 14 months. Kara tilted her head, and she asked me the question that finally cracked the whole thing wide open. "Did she said. "Or did you let the field go quiet, and then act surprised when nothing grew?" I didn't have an answer, because she was right. The flowers in the tin had already told me she was right. Kara reached over and squeezed my arm. "Go," she said. "Go find out why she really drove out here, before you spend the rest of your life wondering. And Daniel?" She smiled, full and warm this time. "When you figure it out, and you will, I want an invitation to the wedding. I take excellent photographs." I laughed. And then I set down my coffee, and I climbed back over that fence. And I went to do the bravest thing I'd done in years. I went to her door. I'd never been to Elena's apartment. I had to look up the address Sophie's school had on file. I stopped on the way and bought 2 cups of coffee, one in each hand, the way she'd held them on my porch. I don't know why. It felt like something. It felt like answering a letter. I stood outside her door for a long time. My heart was going like I'd run a mile. And then I made myself ring the bell. I heard footsteps. The lock turned. The door opened. And there was Elena, in a soft gray sweater, no armor on, her hair down around her shoulders. She looked at me, and then she looked at the 2 coffees in my hands, and I watched the recognition move across her face. I watched her understand. "Daniel?" she breathed. "What are you? How would you know?" She blinked. "What? 3 weeks ago you stood on my porch, and you told me Kara wasn't right for me, and I asked you how you'd know. And you opened your mouth, Elena. You started to answer me, and then you stopped, and you walked past me, and you've been walking past me for 14 months. My voice was shaking now, and I let it shake. "So I'm asking you again, and this time I'm not leaving until you tell me. How would you know what's right for me?" She stared at me, and I watched the deep water rise. I watched her chin lift, that old proud reflex, the armor reaching for its place. "Don't," I said softly. "Please. Not this time. Just once, Elena. Just say it." And something in her gave way. Her chin came down. Her eyes filled. And when she spoke, her voice was barely more than a whisper. But every word came out like it had been waiting 14 months. maybe 7 years, to get free. Because she makes you laugh, Elena said. I saw it from the road. She makes you laugh, and I'm glad I am. You deserve to laugh. A tear broke loose and ran down her cheek, and she didn't wipe it away. But I made you feel, Daniel. There's a difference. Anybody can make you laugh. I'm the one who knows what your face does when you're trying not to cry. I'm the one who sat with you through the frost and the bad years and your father's funeral. I'm the one who knows. Elena, every spring, she said, and her voice broke clean in half. Every single spring, you used to walk all the way out to the back field before the sun came up, and you'd pick the first flower, and you'd put it on my pillow. 14 years, and I kept every one. And then one spring it didn't come, and I lay there in that bed and I waited. It didn't come, and I told myself it didn't matter. It was just a weed. It was just a silly thing. But it wasn't, Daniel. It was the thing. It was you choosing me on purpose. And when it stopped, I knew you'd stopped seeing me. And I should have told you. I should have shaken you awake and said I miss the flowers. I miss being chosen. I'm disappearing and you don't even see it. I should have said all of it. But I didn't. I handed you papers instead, because I was too proud and too scared, and I would rather have lost you on purpose than watched you forget I was there one more day. She was crying now, openly, the calm completely gone. And standing in that doorway, she looked younger and more frightened and more honest than I had ever seen her in all our years together. And I felt the last piece drop into place, the truth I'd been chasing since 9:17 in the morning 3 weeks before. I stopped, I said, and my own voice had gone rough, because I thought you'd stopped looking at me. I thought I bored you. I thought the farmer with dirt under his nails had nothing left that you wanted. So I poured myself into the only thing I knew I was good at, and I let the rest go quiet. I stopped picking the flowers because I'd convinced myself you didn't care anymore. I took a breath that hurt. I didn't know you were lying awake waiting. Elena, I swear to God, I didn't know. I never stopped looking at you, she whispered. I never once stopped, Daniel. I just got so tired of looking at someone who wasn't looking back. We stood there, the two of us, 14 months and 7 years, and a whole ocean of unsaid things finally pouring out between us on a doorstep, with 2 cups of coffee going cold in my hands. And then she stepped back, and she opened the door wider, and she said, "Come in, please, just come in." We didn't kiss. I want you to understand that, because it matters. This isn't the kind of story where love is easy and instant, and needs nothing but a good cry to fix it. We didn't fall into each other's arms and pretend the last 14 months hadn't happened. Instead, we sat down at her little kitchen table, with those 2 coffees between us, and for the first time in years, maybe for the first time ever, we talked. Not arguing, not performing, not managing each other, just talking. The real kind, the kind we'd forgotten how to do. I told her about the field going quiet inside me. She told me about feeling like furniture in her own home. I told her I was sorry, and I meant it all the way down. She told me she was sorry too, for leaving instead of fighting, for choosing her pride over her marriage. It was hard. It was uncomfortable. Some of it hurt so much we had to stop and just breathe. It was, without a doubt, the most honest and intimate conversation of our entire lives. And when the coffee was long cold and the afternoon light had gone soft, Elena reached across that table and put her hand over mine. My rough, cracked farmer's hand. And she didn't say anything. She didn't have to. We weren't fixed. But we'd finally started. Now let me show you one more thing. Let me take you forward. It's spring. The orchard is in full blossom, white and pink as far as you can see, and the whole farm smells like sweetness and new life. The first warm morning of the year came 3 days ago, and I was up before the sun. I walked all the way out to the back field, through the wet grass, in the gray light before dawn, the way I used to. And I found the very first wildflower of the season, small and stubborn and gold at the edge of the field. And I picked it, and I carried it back through the waking light, all that way, and I laid it on the pillow next to Elena's sleeping face, in the bedroom of the farmhouse, in the house that was ours again. She woke up slow, and she saw it, and she picked it up in her fingers, this tiny weed, and she looked at it for a long moment. And then she looked at me, standing there in my work boots like a nervous boy, and her eyes filled up, and she laughed. Really laughed. The laugh I'd fallen in love with a lifetime ago. Sophie came running in a minute later and piled onto the bed between us, and there we were. 3 figures. But she'd drawn 4, hadn't she? That day at the kitchen table. 4 little stick figures holding hands in front of the house. I asked her about it once, later. Who's the 4th person, Bug? And Sophie looked at me like I was the slowest man on earth and said, "That's the baby, Daddy. The one that's coming." Elena went very still beside me, and she smiled, and she put her hand over her belly. But that's a whole other story. Out by the fence that morning, Kara was loading up her car for a 3-week assignment in Iceland. She saw us through the window, the 3 of us, soon to be 4, and she grinned and waved. Elena waved back, warm and real. "She's lovely," Elena said, watching her go. "She told me I wasn't available," I said. Elena raised an eyebrow. "Smart woman." "Very," I said. And I took my wife's hand, my wife, again. And I held it to hold something you almost lost forever and swore you'd never take for granted again. "I'm available now." Elena looked down at our hands, laced together, and she smiled through her tears. "I know," she said softly. "I knocked on the door, didn't I?" And I realized then what she'd done, all those months ago. She'd done the bravest thing in the world for a woman like her, the woman who would rather lose love than beg for it. She'd swallowed every ounce of her pride, bought 2 cups of coffee, and driven all the way out to my porch. She'd dressed it up as a warning about my neighbor. But that knock was never about Kara. That knock was Elena Mercer, finally begging me to remember her. And this time I did. "So let me ask you something before you go. And I want you to really sit with it, because I think it matters more than anything else in this whole story. How many people in your life have stopped leaving flowers on your pillow? And how many have you stopped leaving flowers for? How many of the people you love are lying awake right now, quietly waiting for some small sign that you still see them, while you tell yourself it doesn't matter, it's just a little thing. You'll get to it tomorrow? And here's the one I really need you to breathe in deep before you answer. If the person you love most walked out your door tomorrow without a word, would you be able to say, with your whole heart, that you never once stops seeing them? Or would you be left standing in an empty doorway at 9:17 in the morning, holding 2 cups of cold coffee, finally understanding everything? A single flower too late? Don't wait until the field goes quiet. Go pick the flower today. If this story touched something in you, if it made you think of someone, do me a small favor. Subscribe to the channel and tap that notification bell so you never miss a story like this one. Because the next one might just be the reminder someone you love has been waiting their whole life to hear. Thank you for staying till the very end. Now go tell them, while you still can.